Hi everyone, it's Suzanne here. Today I'm going to be showing you my second art journal page in the small art journal that Amira sent me, so the one that we're going to swap. So she sent me that beautiful napkin with the pretty bird on it, so I decided I'm going to use that. But first I'm just using my Liquitex Matte Gel Medium to lay down some tissue paper. This is Tim Holtz tissue paper, and I put it down with a layer of matte gel, dry it, and then put another layer of the matte gel over the top and dry that as well before moving on to adding some paint. So this first layer of paint doesn't last long. It was too light. I had in mind a much brighter page, so I actually paint over the top of this one. I just wanted quite a bright page. I was doing this on a beautiful rainy, gloomy day in Queensland where it was actually nice and cool for a change. I did put a bit of gesso over some of the darker parts of that tissue paper because it was really, those numbers were really quite bold. And here you can see the brighter blue that I'm putting over the entire page. This is more like what I had in mind when I started. So that paint, believe it or not, is from Kmart here in Australia, and I love the colour of it. It's really beautiful. It's so inexpensive. Here I'm just putting on a few lighter patches with some light blue paint, just in a few spots with one of my pounces. I find that they're really very easy to do your blending with, and yeah, I really like them. They're great little piece of equipment. So yeah, I'm just popping that around in a few spots on the page, and here I'm using some texture paste and I've put in a bit of green colour burst because I want to do this kind of flourish that the bird is going to kind of sit on, otherwise it'll be just floating around in midair, and I didn't want to have it like that, so I'm using a bit of texture paste to do this flourish. I'm using a metal stencil and I find them a little difficult to work with, especially if it's not a really even surface, but it turns out okay. In the end it worked fairly well. A little bit did get under it, but it's not very noticeable at all really. So when I've done that, I dry that off before I move on. So here I'm just about to tear off the part of the image that I want to use, and to do that I outline the image, the part that I want, with some water, and if you do that your tissue paper will tear where you've put that water down. It's a great way because you do not want a straight edge on your tissue paper before you lay it down. Okay, so I'm going to be gluing that onto that page. I'm just going to take a bit off the bottom because I've realised that that's going to be on my art journal page, and I don't want it to be a straight line because they're very hard to blend if you leave it straight. And so here I'm just doing the same thing with the butterflies that were on that piece of napkin, because I've decided I'm going to add those as well. And also I've got a beautiful decoupage flower piece that I'm going to be putting opposite that bird. Okay, so there are my two butterflies, and there's also another small piece of the branch and leaves that I'm going to use as well. So I want to use as much of it as I can. Okay, so now I'm going to put these pieces on using the matte gel medium again. I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put all of the pieces, and using some baking paper underneath just to protect the pages underneath, so you don't want to be gluing all your pages together. Alright, so I didn't worry about the edge, that left hand edge there, because obviously it's hanging off the end of the page, so it doesn't matter. So after I've laid it down, I dry it off, and after I've put them all down, there's the flower piece that I'm using. So I got these, they're absolutely beautiful. I got them in a D-stash, so they were really inexpensive, and they have a bit of texture on them as well, but just the same as the tissue paper, I just lay it down with the matte gel medium. There's one of the butterflies, and I put the other one down underneath the bird, and there I'm going over the top of the entire image with some matte gel medium just to make sure it's stuck down. So now I'm mixing up with water some of the same paint that I painted the page with, and this is just going to hide those edges of the paper, of the tissue paper. So it's got quite a lot of water in it. You don't want it too thick, and I like to do this with my finger. I find I can control it better how much I use, but it really does take away those edges if you do this. But yeah, I like to really water down the paint and go over that image. And it's kind of hard to tell on here, but it just makes those images blend right onto that page. It doesn't look like it's been stuck on there with that it's off a napkin. It looks kind of like you painted it on there yourself. Not that I am able to do that, but that's kind of what it looks like when you blend those edges into the background. Here I'm just going to be using a bit of gold, and I'm going to do a bit of stenciling around. I made sure I dried the page though before I start this, so just adding a bit of stenciling, just some leaf flourishes there, with one of my stencils. This paint is very inexpensive. It's Anita's Metallic Classic Gold paint it is. I get it from Kaisercraft for $1, and it's adds a lovely bit of sheen, a bit of shine to your project. Okay, so now I'm going to use some of my artist pick pens just to add a bit more colour to the bird image, because on the tissue paper, because it is tissue paper, those colours have sort of disappeared, but when you put the when you use the artist pick pen, you can brighten it right up, and they blend beautifully, especially if you've used the Liquitex matte gel medium. It blends beautifully, so it doesn't dry straight away. I think it's India ink, and you can blend it for a little while before it dries. So I use my pens on the bird and also on that butterfly underneath. I give it a bit of colour as well, and some of the flowers. So some of the flowers on the branch were like an apricot pink colour, but the others had no colour, so I give them a bit of colour with an orange pen just to brighten the page up a little bit more. Okay, so now I move on to doing a bit more stenciling with some white paint. Just changed stencils to these dots, and I just add a few dots here and there around the page. The next thing I move on to is again with the white paint, but mixed with some water, and I'm just adding some, white splatters with a brush there. I'm trying to keep the splatters quite small, not big blobs of paint. And I also decide to do it with a bit of yellow to match those little yellow flowers there. I've got a bit too much on my poor old butterfly, but I dab a bit of that off before it dries. And here's the finished product. So I add a sentiment. It says exquisite beauty is everywhere around you, and I also inked the edges with some archival ink. And that is it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a terrific day. Bye.